Good morning, everyone. I am not Ricardo. I'm Halcyon, and I am here to introduce the Diamond Sponsor session with Kurt. I'm going to mess this up.
Come on.
Wolfenberger.
That's right. Well done.
Oh, yay.
And
Everybody messes
Halcyon,
my name up.
I thought I'd messed that one up too.
Yeah, we're good. And he is the NGCS engineer with InDigital, and I'm going to let him take it away.
Well, that was easy enough on your side, Halcyon. Thank you
Yeah.
for the introduction. Full of a lot of valuable lessons, a lot of valuable information, and it all has that common thread of enabling and equipping you to be and to do better, daring to be great. Having served some time in the Army and having served the public safety industry for a couple of decades now, I've developed a great deal of respect for the positions that you fill as public safety, dispatch, telecommunicators. And based on what I've seen, your role truly involves more than you get credit for. As far as I've been able to identify in NIMS documents, and yes, I go through those as well, in the ICS 300 document set and training, I believe you fit the definition of an incident commander because you're the first responder to really engage in a scene. And therefore, and as such, you're responsible for coordinating the emergency response by means of voice communication systems that include 911 lines, admin lines, radio systems. And these systems occasionally, at least at some points, become inoperable or unreliable at the very best. Even your radios can be affected in some areas due to the terrain and radio transmission. But as incident commanders, you're required and tasked with being able to overcome these communication systems failures. And the information that I'll be sharing with you today has the potential to overcome nearly all communications systems failures affecting 911 and call handling systems in general. The concepts and technologies that I'll be sharing with you today are available to your agencies right now and can provide real redundancy and resiliency to your voice communication systems. And please keep in mind when I talk about voice communication systems or phone systems, what I'm really referring to are your 911 and your admin phone systems. And my overall goal during this presentation is to promote the development of a plan to maintain a communications path with your first responders and the communities that depend upon you. Think of it as a crisis communications plan. I found that at ready.gov, and I'll be sharing some of the links with you toward the end of this, and you'll be able to find them in the slide deck later. That'll help you put plans together. But to begin with, let's start taking a look at some of the recent outages. Here is a tweet from the Minneapolis Police Department that was made just a couple of weeks ago. For some reason, the service provider informed the Minneapolis Police Department that there was a national outage of 911. Thankfully, it was not a complete national outage, although it did affect agencies in 14 states who were serviced by Entrado and its partners. We probably won't know exactly how many calls were lost during this time, but you know that calls were lost. And callers would have probably heard ringing with no answer. They may have heard busy signals in some cases. And these were all at times when these people really needed help, or they wouldn't have dialed in the first place. I actually took some time before I slipped this slide into the deck to call the Minneapolis Police Department at this 10-digit telephone number just to see what it was like, to check and see if there were any caller trees or auto attendants on the line, and there weren't. It rang directly into dispatch. And there was no Allie, there was no Annie, there was no information available except what I told them. And I asked how they handled those calls, and they said it was chaotic and that it was very difficult. And you all know how difficult it can be when you have callers coming in on administrative lines who have emergencies, who should be on your 911 trucks. So what we need to recognize is all communication systems can and do experience service interruptions at various points in time during their operation. And some of these interruptions are planned, such as routine maintenance and upgrades. But many of the outages recently have been unexpected, and they've occurred within the carrier networks, and sometimes pretty deep within the carrier networks. And this is happening, like you saw the tweet announced, throughout the nation. So just in case you thought these service interruptions were only affecting your agencies, well, think again. It's happening everywhere. Legacy systems are failing. Next-gen 911 systems are revealing their hidden features, which we also call bugs. But the point here is, no 911 service provider takes their role passively. No 911 service provider wants to be responsible for failing to deliver the call. We recognize the magnitude of the roles in the emergency services industry, and we strive to be 100% successful in delivering the call. At every point of our network, we add redundancy to do so. We add redundant equipment, redundant software, redundant networks. We throw as much network at these EZNets as we can. And all that does is provide the resiliency that we expect will always stay up. So there's redundant everything, essentially. I've been in dispatch centers when outages have occurred. I have vivid memories of the events that unfold during these times when calls aren't ringing in, and the questions and the statements that are coming out, and the commands to call and dial. You know, when was the last call? When was the last 911 call? Do you remember hearing any admin calls come in? And those statements that come behind it, like try dialing 911, see if it's even working, or try the admin number. And then you realize, hey, there's nothing ringing into my dispatch center. Why not? And really the only place you have to call is your telephone company or your 911 system service provider to find out what's going on. And sometimes that's difficult, depending on your environment. So what are the most essential systems at your agency that you use to answer and dispatch the call? Well, we know for sure you need radios, or you won't be able to communicate with first responders or your people in the field. But you also need admin phones, because sometimes you have to call one of your first responders' cell phone. Or you can't really take a 911 call without 911 phones, whether it's legacy or next gen. So all of these systems are important too. All of these other systems that you see here, TDD, CAD, MAP, they're all important. But if you can't answer the call, if you don't have a phone, you can't dispatch effectively. So as we look at survivability planning, we recognize that planning always boils down to a couple of hours for a certain result. And in this particular presentation, we're talking about restoring communications and what can we do to make sure that we maintain those communication systems. When a 911 call handling system fails processing calls, what happens to the next call? Does it ring in at an alternate location? Does it ring into your admin lines like it did for Minneapolis and so many other PSAPs throughout the nation with no alley, no data? Does it ring into a line that has an auto attendant? Have you checked your admin numbers? Make sure that they're coming in without needing to press 1 or 2 to get to dispatch. And when was the last time you tested your alternate routing strategy? And how long does it take for that alternate routing strategy to deliver the call to that final route? These are important questions that you should look at your next opportunity. So what can you do to work around phone system failures? What if all you had to do to move to a backup call handling system locally was to forward your 911 and your admin calls to a backup system through the regular telephone network using a 10-digit number? What if the 911 backup system also provided the ability to provide inbound and outbound admin calling features without any provision, without any changes? And what if the backup system could also receive your admin telephone number calls if your admin PBX was down? InDigital has developed methods and currently operates systems and technologies that do just that. InDigital's primary focus is 911, and our primary objective is to deliver the call. So during this time, we've taken the role of 911 system service provider in several states, regions, and counties throughout the nation, utilizing our National Emergency Services IP network. And at the heart of the InDigital company is innovation. We see real-world problems and work to overcome them. And it's this innovative spirit that has fostered the development of several platforms and i3 functional elements in software. From platforms such as text to 911 and carrier-grade IP selective router software that our partners at Motorola use and is known as Vesta Router, to management information services that Caleb Branch presented yesterday. 911 Logics is our call visualization and reporting platform that is part of every core services deployment that we implement. To the Mevo backup and disaster recovery system that we're talking about today, which is also deployed as part of every core services deployment that we make. The InDigital team continues to develop new features and functions that also continue to be refined through real-world experiences of providing 911 services throughout the nation. Our team learned early on what it meant to provide emergency services to 911 centers. We learned that we needed to be willing to work as hard and as long as you did, and that we needed to take our role seriously as you take yours. And by the way, we also learned to take it easy with you in pre-COVID in-person conferences. Not that this isn't good. We appreciate the Dare to Be Great program that Ricardo and his team has put on. But unwinding in person at those conferences was always quite a great pleasure for us all. But back to the point. Let's take a look at some of the Mevo station capabilities. Remember the question that I asked you earlier? What if all you had to do to move to a backup call handling system locally was to forward your 911 and your admin calls to a backup system through the regular telephone network using a 10-digit number? The other question was, what if the 911 backup system also provided the ability to provide inbound and outbound administrative call handling functions? And what if that backup system could also receive your administrative calls by means of 10-digit admin lines? And what if that backup system also had the same types of functions that your primary 911 system had, such as the ability to park calls, barge in, and monitor calls that were occurring on other stations that were of like manner, transfer and conference 911 and PSTN, admin line dial in and out, single button callback, map capabilities, recording capabilities, the ability to look back at call histories and do a single button callback. Well, the next few slides will cover the Mevo deployment scenarios and the stations that we use in this backup platform. In this particular slide, what you're looking at is an example where calls are delivered directly from a primary 911 and admin phone systems, regardless of the vendor. And take notice, carrier A can be any carrier or any system service provider. In failure conditions, the calls will typically be delivered to adjacent PSAPs via 911 call routing systems or via 10-digit dialing to admin lines or other locations based on a predefined time. 911 call delivery will follow the call routing strategies that you provided to your service providers or your agency provided to the service providers many years ago. And it's important to review those occasionally to make sure that they're still appropriately assigned. And it goes without mentioning that 911 answered on admin lines will have no alley and in some cases may not even be recorded. So let's take a look at this call flow. The first example shows a typical route in through the trunks, through the CPE to the workstation for you to handle and dispatch. The next example is the call arriving through the administrative lines. In the third example, your systems at your agency are completely unavailable and will alternate route to a different jurisdiction in your county or a different county that you've made arrangements with. So this is any primary 911 provider, any CPE with no backup equipment. This next slide is representing CPE vendors' backup phones. So you see the addition of the black phone in the headset side. This only works when the provider has added some extra configuration and equipment in the call flow. But really, from our experience, we've seen that this very rarely works and will not survive trunk failures. This is a typical call flow. The call would arrive into the primary workstation through the CPE from the carrier. If that workstation was unavailable, the call would route from the call handling system. We shouldn't say route because it's just being handled locally to the backup phone. If that backup phone was unavailable, the call would then move to an administrative line potentially and then be delivered to the workstation or phone systems. And then ultimately, if that entire system was unavailable, the call would alternate route in the same way that it normally does to an adjacent agency or different jurisdiction in your county. So InDigital recommends avoiding this form of backup. We would rather suggest that you use a separate backup system and a separate provider to offer you a true backup to your 911 and admin call handling. Most of the phones that are on the market today are able to do what we call dual registration. So you might have a registration to a local system on one of these phones to be able to pick up calls there, and you might have one into the core InDigital National EZNet. So as a side note, one thing that a lot of engineering doesn't include is the recognition that when a 911 system service provider delivers a call into a 911 system host at your agency, that call handling platform will actually hold that call at your location. So if it can't get to the workstation and it can't get to the phone, the backup phone, then that call is stuck there unless there's been additional configuration provided for that call to either do a flash transfer back in on the camera trunks or to dial a 10-digit number out. So there's a lot of engineering that we've seen as missed in most deployments. It's very important that you pay attention to all of these different scenarios. So with Mevo at your agency, you have the option to contact your carrier or your system service provider and provide them with a 10-digit telephone number. We call this our alternate emergency access number. Just as if they would provide or route calls to your admin lines, they would just route calls to this 10-digit number. Sometimes they give a little resistance to doing this, but what they need to understand is this is just an admin number. And if they don't like toll-free numbers, we can give them a standard 10-digit number. And it's also important that everybody knows that we use are protected with InDigital telephony denial of service systems. So we can detect those attempts to deny service to our backup platforms. And we'll also assist your agencies with the development of policies and practices, and as well as making arrangements with, between you and your service providers if we're not already the 911 system service provider. In this call flow, basically everything is the same. The call is originally delivered to your workstation in the normal manner, and if that fails, we move through the admin lines. If that fails, we alternate route to adjacent PSAP. And this is where the magic takes place. When everything is offline at your dispatch center, or the carrier's having a problem in their call delivery network, which maybe could have fixed some of these 14 states' problems, the carrier can alternate route the calls to InDigital, and we can drop these basically we massage the numbers so it looks like a brand new 911 call coming in, and we feed them into these phones with data, with recording, with transfer, with all the same capabilities that you have on your primary systems, with the exception of TDD. But in backup, in the backup model, it's not often needed, and if it is, you can always do what you need to do on the coupler. So you can see the value of having the Mevo phone out of band. In this model, in this scenario, basically we're completely bypassing the carrier 911 call delivery network, including your CPE and your workstations. We're taking it out of band through the PSTN telephone network and then bringing it into our EZNet and using VPNs running IPsec to deliver the calls to these phones. And the routers we use out at the agencies are similar to what we have in this mobile command kit, our Mevo Anywhere. We use routers that have multiple network access connections. So we use dual SIMs. Typically it's AT&T and Verizon. We have the capability of using FirstNet. It's not widely deployed yet, but we do make sure that the SIMs are using data priority of service, as well as connections to cable internet or some sort of high-speed internet connection, so that we can also provide other network services out of Wi-Fi environments in these kits. But the idea is to provide as much network that's available so that we don't lose the call, so that we can deliver the call to you so that dispatch can happen. So now we're going to take a look at some pictures of Mevo services and the phones that they work on. So yes, it's an IP phone. They're off-the-shelf types of equipment, but it's really not just a phone. It's an appliance. It's a functional tool that you can use to dispatch. We've had several instances where large counties and small counties have had to operate off of these phones as their primary 911 systems due to some new software problems with Next Gen 911 CPE purchased at these counties. And we've received nothing but good reports. If you look at our Twitter feed and our Facebook accounts, you can see some of the testimonials from our clients with these Mevo phones. But as an appliance, it's just really packed full of features. In this image, what you see is an incoming 911 call. It's clearly announced as an emergency call, and both phones on the left and right are receiving a call from the phone in the center. When the call is answered, you see Annie, you see Allie, and if this were a real wireless 911 call, you would see latitude, longitude, and all the information that you choose to see in the Allie field. It is a formatted Allie field. It's based on what you ask for. Take note across the bottom soft keys. You have 911 transfer capabilities, mapping capabilities, extended details from the Allie record that are not being presented on the screen, rebid capability, and single button callback. You'll also notice a barge button on the other phone that would allow another TC to be able to listen to or take over a call. Here you see the 911 details soft button pressed or selected, providing information such as the responder agencies, fire, EMS, uncertainty, elevation, maybe even some comments if you have your database, as well as ESN. In this image, we have selected the 911 transfer button from the original call, and we are presented with as many transfer points that you need. Typically, it's no more than 10. It would be your adjacent agencies or jurisdictional transfer points, maybe emergency medical dispatch facilities. This is an image of the geolocation capabilities. If data is available, we will put a dot a pin on the phone on the map so that you can see. You can zoom in, zoom out, swipe around, and control the screen for what that's worth. After selecting the barge feature from the opposite phone, the screen presents the user with the ability to monitor the call, dispatch only conference, or a three-way conference with the caller. And it's graceful in that you can move through these options as necessary without disconnecting any of the callers. And when monitor is selected, the phone that's monitoring the call also receives the Allie spill, so the data is viewed across the phone systems. So that's a lot of information to process on those phones in a pretty short amount of time. I moved through it pretty quickly because it really is just a phone and it's about that easy to use. Very intuitive interface, and as I mentioned before, all of these pieces of equipment are off the shelf, even in the core. So Mevo itself is a collection of devices and technologies um, that work together to form a completely independent backup and disaster recovery platform for your voice communication systems. And that is one of the takeaways that I really want you to keep in mind. You can't work through the networks that are having problems. You have to go around them. And that's what we do with this particular platform. So it's got a couple of key points that I'd like to leave behind with you as well. This system offers a transitional element as well. So think of it this way. If you have a legacy 911 system, you can install Mevo phones and keep them in the background as a backup system. And beyond that, when it comes time for you to upgrade your legacy 911 or replace your next gen 911 system, you can actually set phones up next to your workstations and take calls in the same location. You don't have to move your radios or anything, while your old systems are being torn out and your new systems are being put in. And then you could also even do training right in the same location where you're at. So this system is designed to back up any admin or NG or legacy 911 system. It is also able to work with and back up any 911 system service provider in service today and could be in the future. This is a reference from Nina on developing your continuity of operations plans. And again, there's a lot of elements behind this that we're obviously not looking at, from administrative office management and dispatch centers. We're just looking at voice here, and there's a good section on voice services in this document. This is an APCO reference of the same type of material. And then, as I previously mentioned, the ready.gov crisis communications plan, because this is really what we're talking about. You dealing with a communications crisis in your dispatch center when you do not have phone system communications. So that brings a close to this presentation. If you have any questions or you would like to talk to InDigital about your deployment options, please give us a call, or even easier, send us an email at info.indigital.net. Thank you so much for listening. It looks like you're muted. Well, I did notice a couple of questions. Some of you have asked about the costs of the system, and I can assure you that the costs of operating these phones is a fraction of the cost that you see on primary call handling platforms. Okay, Halcyon says that she's unable to mute or unmute, so I will say bye for her.